Un ranchero vivió solo durante años, hasta que una mujer desnuda apareció llorando en su cerca. On the far edge of the galaxy, on a planet mostly made of red dirt and jagged rocks, lived a man named Jarek. He was a rancher, though not the kind most people imagined. There were no green pastures or soft hills here, just endless stretches of dry, cracked soil, jagged mountains, and a sky that glowed with a faint orange light even at night. It was a harsh world, but Jarek had grown to call it home. Jarek had lived alone for many years. He had built his ranch with his own hands, a few shelters for his animals, a sturdy home of metal and stone, and fences to keep his small herd of bioengineered animals in place. He liked it that way. The solitude gave him peace, and the work gave him purpose. Life was simple, and simplicity suited him. Every morning he would wake with the sun, the orange light spilling over the jagged mountains. His first task was always the animals. They were strange creatures, a mix of Earth livestock and alien genetics. They could survive the heat, the thin air, and even the occasional sandstorms that tore across the landscape. Jarek had spent years breeding them to be strong, and he knew each one by name. After feeding the animals, he would check the fences. The winds here were strong and constant, and the wire fences could not last long against the storms. He would repair them, hammering metal posts deep into the ground, sometimes working for hours without stopping. Then he would climb the small ridge near his home to look out over the endless plains. From there he could see nothing but rocks, sand, and the distant mountains, and he would sometimes imagine what lay beyond. Jarek rarely thought about other humans. He had no neighbors for hundreds of kilometers. Supplies arrived only when a ship passed nearby, and often months would go by without anyone visiting. He liked the quiet. There were no arguments, no rules, no politics. Just him, his animals, and the planet. Still, at night, when the cold winds howled through the rocks, he sometimes felt a pang of loneliness. He would sit by the fire, the small flames dancing in the wind, and listen to the silence. He thought about the people he had known long ago, on a planet light years away. But memories faded, and the loneliness passed. He had learned to live with it. One night, Jarek was in his home repairing a water filter for the animals. He had almost finished when he noticed a small blinking light on his scanner. It was faint, but it was there. A strange energy signature that he had never seen before. He frowned. His scanner picked up all sorts of things: animals, weather patterns, and sometimes distant passing ships. But this was different. The signal was irregular, almost like a pulse, and it was moving closer to his ranch. Jarek's curiosity was piqued, but he did not panic. He had faced sandstorms, wild animals, and even alien raiders before. Whatever this was, he could handle it. He set down his tools and went outside, looking toward the ridge. The night sky was clear, the two moons glowing like silver coins against the orange haze. The signal was moving fast, too fast for a normal ship. It felt. He watched for a long time. Hours passed, and the wind carried the scent of dried dust across the plains. Then he heard it, a soft, almost human sound carried on the wind. At first, he thought it was the wind itself whistling through the rocks, but then it came again, louder, closer, a faint cry. Jarek's heart beat faster. He was not a stranger to danger, but he had never heard anything like this. He grabbed his coat, a heavy leather piece that had protected him from countless storms, and ran toward the sound. He reached the edge of his fence and froze. There, on the dry ground, was a woman. She was naked, trembling, and crying. Her skin glimmered faintly in the moonlight, not like any human skin he had seen, but somehow familiar. Her hair was long and dark, tangled with dust, and her eyes were wide with fear. Jarek's instincts kicked in. He lowered his hands, speaking softly, though he doubted she understood him. "It's okay, you're safe here. I won't hurt you." The woman looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She stumbled, almost falling, and Jarek caught her, steadying her with a strong arm. Her body was weak, trembling from exhaustion or fear. He could not tell. He draped his coat around her shoulders, and she clung to him, still shivering. Jarek could see strange devices strapped to her wrists and ankles, faintly glowing with blue light. He had no idea what they were, but they looked advanced, far beyond anything humans had built. Jarek led her to his home, offering her food and water. She drank quickly, gulping down the liquid as if she had not eaten in days. He watched her carefully, studying every movement, every expression. There was something intelligent about her, he realized. Something human, but different. Once she had eaten, Jarek tried to communicate. He pointed to himself and said, "Jarek." Then he pointed to her, hoping she would respond. She shook her head, unable to speak, but she smiled faintly, a small gesture of understanding. Over the next few hours, Jarek worked to calm her. He had no translator, no way to know her language, but gestures, simple drawings in the dirt, and patience slowly began to bridge the gap. He learned her name, or at least a version of it she could speak. Lyra. Lyra had no idea how she had arrived on this barren planet. She remembered only a rush of light, a violent shaking, and then the fear. The devices on her body were strange, possibly alien in origin, and she had no idea how to use them. Jarek examined them carefully, marveling at the technology. He could not identify it, but he knew it was advanced. As the night wore on, Jarek felt a strange connection to Lyra. For the first time in years, he felt the warmth of human presence. She was not just a stranger. She was a being in need, and he could help her. That thought filled him with purpose, a feeling he had almost forgotten. He prepared a small sleeping area for her, covering it with blankets and cushions. Lyra curled up, still shivering, but her breathing became steady. Jarek watched her for a while, then stepped outside. The stars stretched across the sky in endless patterns, and the two moons cast silver light on the rocky plains. Jarek realized something important. This planet, harsh and unforgiving, had suddenly become less lonely. He did not know who Lyra was or where she came from, but he knew one thing. Humans could survive anything. They could adapt, endure, and thrive even in the coldest, most remote corners of the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, they could also save one another. The wind howled, carrying the cries of distant creatures across the plains. Jarek looked back at his home, at the figure of Lyra resting inside. He felt a strange mix of caution and hope. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but humans were clever and strong. And he, Jarek, was ready to face whatever came next, because now he was not entirely alone. The night passed slowly, the fire burning low, and as the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, Jarek knew the world had changed for him forever. A stranger had arrived at his fence, crying, lost and alone. And in saving her, he might discover something even more important: the meaning of human connection, courage, and the unstoppable spirit that had carried humanity across the stars. The sun rose slowly over the jagged mountains, painting the red plains with streaks of gold. Jarek stood at the edge of his fence, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had not slept well. His mind was restless. Lyra's presence weighed on him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made him feel alive again. He had lived for years without anyone, and now there was someone who needed him. And he, in turn, felt a need to protect her. Inside the small home, Lyra was awake. She had wrapped herself in the blankets Jarek had given her, but her eyes remained wide and alert. Every sound, a rustle of the wind, the movement of the animals, made her flinch. She touched the devices on her wrists and ankles, glowing faintly, and studied them carefully. Though she could not speak Jarek's language, she was intelligent, observant, and determined. Jarek entered with a tray of food. "Eat," he said, pointing to the bowls. Lyra nodded and began to eat, carefully, one bite at a time. Jarek watched her. She was fragile in appearance, but he could see strength in her eyes, a determination that reminded him of humans he had known on other worlds. After breakfast, Jarek led her outside. "Animals," he said, pointing to the herd. Lyra looked, fascinated. The creatures were unlike anything she had ever seen. Part cow, part alien, adapted to survive the harsh conditions of this planet. She reached out a hand, and one of the animals approached, sniffing cautiously. Jarek smiled. "They know me. You can trust them." Lyra spent the morning observing, touching the animals, learning their habits. Jarek showed her how to feed them, how to mend the fences, how to watch the horizon for danger. Every gesture was simple, basic, but it communicated volumes. Slowly, she began to understand. Slowly, she began to trust. By midday, Jarek and Lyra sat on the ridge near the fence, looking out over the endless plains. Jarek broke the silence. "Where did you come from?" he asked, pointing to the sky. Lyra shook her head, confused. She pointed to the devices on her body, then drew a crude map in the dirt with a stick. Jarek crouched beside her, watching the lines. It was a star map, unlike any he had seen. Lines connected dots, planets, stars, paths through space. He recognized some patterns, faintly, but others were foreign. Lyra pointed to one point on the map, then made a motion of fear, covering her face. She was telling him she had fled from something. Jarek's mind raced. He had heard stories of humans living on distant colonies, scattered across the galaxy, far beyond the reach of central governments. Some of these colonies had contact with alien species, sometimes friendly, sometimes hostile. Lyra's devices were advanced, not human-made, and the fear in her eyes told him she had run from a dangerous force. He looked at her, then at the horizon. "Aliens?" he asked. She nodded, trembling. Then she made a motion he did not understand, a circle with her hand, then pointing outward. Jarek frowned. He did not know the language, but he understood enough. The danger was coming. It was close. The hours passed slowly. Jarek worked on reinforcing the fences while keeping one eye on Lyra. She began to follow his movements, learning quickly. She was intelligent, and even without words, she began to mimic his actions, helping him carry materials, checking the fences, and even attempting small repairs. Jarek was impressed. Humans could survive anywhere, he thought. Even on this barren planet, she was adapting, learning, becoming capable. That night, Jarek and Lyra sat by the fire. The sky was clear, and the moons hung low, casting silver light over the plains. Lyra pointed to the devices on her body again, then tapped them, trying to activate something. A small holographic projection appeared, flickering and unstable, showing what looked like a star system and small ships moving around a planet. Jarek leaned closer. He could see the ships, tiny dots of light moving in formation. "They are tracking you," he said, pointing to the ships. Lyra nodded violently, fear written across her face. She drew her hands across her throat, then pointed to herself. The message was clear. If the aliens found her, she would be captured. Or worse. Jarek's mind worked fast. He had survived storms, predators, and hostile raiders before, but this was different. This was not a fight he could face with brute strength alone. He needed a plan, cleverness, and patience, and he had something many humans had: ingenuity. The next day, he began preparing. He led Lyra to the rocky cliffs near the edge of the ranch.
"We will hide," he said, pointing to small crevices and overhangs. Lyra followed, learning quickly.
She understood fear, but she also understood survival. She began to help, gathering rocks, digging small trenches, and even learning how to camouflage herself. Jarek showed her how to move silently across the plains, how to observe the horizon for danger, and how to create signals that could mislead pursuers. She picked up the lessons quickly, her fear giving way to determination. Humans, he thought, could always find a way. No matter the odds, they adapted. By evening, they returned to the ranch. Jarek had prepared small traps along the fence lines, simple things, but effective. Some were meant to slow down pursuit, others to signal movement. He taught Lyra how to trigger them safely. Together they worked silently, their movements synchronized, a partnership forming without a single word exchanged. As night fell, Lyra began to open up. She gestured toward the stars again, pointing at distant points on her star map. Jarek realized she was trying to show him where her home had been and where the alien threat was coming from. He traced the lines with his finger, imagining the vast distances, the lonely colonies, the dangers of the galaxy. Humans were small in this vast expanse, but clever, resourceful, and strong. That was what kept them alive. Suddenly a noise interrupted their thoughts. A low hum, almost mechanical, coming from the horizon. Jarek's heart tightened. The alien ships were close. He could see faint lights flickering in the distance, moving in ways that suggested intelligence, strategy, and threat. "Then stay inside," he said firmly, grabbing Lyra's hand and leading her back to the shelter. She obeyed, fear and trust mixing in her eyes. They watched together as the lights moved closer, aware of the danger, aware of the stakes. Jarek knew what he had to do. He could not fight this threat with strength alone. He needed traps, deception, and cleverness. And he needed Lyra's help. Together, they could survive. Alone, they would be easy prey. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly. Jarek taught Lyra how to read the land, to understand where the ground could hide them, where the cliffs could provide cover, where the plains could be used to mislead enemies. She learned quickly, using her intelligence and intuition. One evening, as they rested on the ridge, Jarek looked at Lyra. She was exhausted but smiling faintly, her eyes filled with determination. For the first time, he felt a sense of hope. Humans could endure. Humans could survive anywhere. And with ingenuity, courage, and trust, they could even outsmart enemies far stronger than themselves. The alien ships were coming, faster than he had expected. But Jarek was ready. He had built a plan, and now he had a partner. Together, human ingenuity and courage would meet alien technology and intelligence, and together they would show that humans, even alone on a barren planet, could never be underestimated. Night fell again, the two moons rising over the red plains. Jarek and Lyra sat quietly, listening to the wind. The aliens were close, but they were not defeated yet. The night was full of tension, full of possibility, and in the quiet, Jarek realized that his lonely life had changed forever. A stranger had arrived, crying at his fence. And now, that stranger was becoming a part of his life, a part of his fight, and a part of the story that would test human courage against the stars. The wind howled across the plains, carrying a promise of challenge, danger, and Jarek smiled faintly. Humans were never truly alone. They had each other, and they had their ingenuity. That was enough. The winds howled across the red plains, carrying fine dust that stung Jarek's skin. He crouched behind a cluster of jagged rocks, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. Lyra crouched beside him, her eyes wide, tracing every movement with careful attention. The alien ships were close now, tiny specks of light in the distance, but their speed and formation told him everything he needed to know. They were intelligent, dangerous, and relentless. Jarek had spent the past few days preparing. He had reinforced the fences, hidden traps along the plain, and created decoys with scrap metal and holographic mirrors. He had taught Lyra how to trigger the traps, how to move silently, and how to hide. She had picked up the lessons quickly, surprising him with her intelligence and quick reflexes. Humans, he thought, could survive anywhere. These moments proved it again. "Do you understand the map?" Jarek asked quietly, pointing to the star chart she had drawn in the dirt. Lyra nodded, then traced a line with her finger to a distant point in the galaxy. She looked at him, fear in her eyes, and made a small motion. Flying ships, moving fast, hunting. He understood. She had escaped from them once before, and if they found her now, she might not survive a second time. Jarek took a deep breath. "We will stop them," he said firmly, more to himself than to her. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw hope mirrored in her gaze. Humans could endure terrible odds. He had seen it before, and together they would find a way. He led her back to the ranch. Inside, he pulled out the strange devices attached to her wrists and ankles. They emitted a soft blue glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jarek examined them carefully, twisting knobs and pressing buttons he did not fully understand. Somehow, he managed to stabilize the signal. A holographic map flickered to life above the table, showing star systems, lines connecting them, and small moving dots, ships moving in formation. Lyra pointed to one dot, then another, then covered her face. She had fled from these ships, these aliens. Jarek understood the urgency now. He had a decision to make: hide and wait, or fight smart and fight clever. Humans had a history of surviving through ingenuity. He chose the latter. Over the next hours, Jarek taught Lyra more about human strategies. They studied the terrain carefully, marking vantage points, choke points, and traps. He showed her how to use her own devices against their pursuers. Together, they created a plan that combined human cunning with Lyra's advanced knowledge. "You have to trust yourself," he told her, gesturing to the horizon. "Even when it's scary, even when it seems impossible, humans survive because we find a way." She nodded. Though silent, her determination grew with each passing hour. She copied his movements, her fingers deftly adjusting the devices, setting them to send false signals or mislead trackers. Jarek could see her growing stronger, more confident. She was not just a survivor, she was a fighter. That night, the hum of the approaching fleet grew louder. The alien ships moved with precision, scanning the plains. Jarek had set up holographic decoys, small projections of human figures moving across the plains, designed to confuse and distract. Some were rigged to emit false signals, drawing the ships away from the real ranch. Others were traps, ready to disable enemy sensors or slow them down. Lyra watched everything with awe. She had never seen such resourcefulness in her own people. On her homeworld, humans often relied on technology and numbers. Here, on a barren planet with almost nothing to work with, they survived through brains, courage, and adaptability. She realized that humans could always adapt. She realized that she could trust him. Suddenly, the horizon lit up with moving lights. The aliens were closer than ever. The decoys activated automatically, scattering across the plains. Jarek and Lyra crouched low, watching as the ships responded to the false signals. Some diverted from the ranch entirely, and some were trapped by clever placements of rocks, dust, and holographic mirrors.
It's working, Jarek whispered, a faint smile on his face. Stay calm.
Follow my lead. They moved together across the plain, using cover, staying low, and signaling each other silently. Jarek had taught her a system of gestures, hand signals, taps on the shoulder, small nods. They worked like a team, moving with precision, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hours passed in tense silence. The wind tore across the rocks. The alien hums grew louder, then fainter, then louder again. Jarek realized they were adapting to the traps. They were smart, but humans were smarter. He adjusted a few devices, creating a chain reaction that would confuse the alien scanners at the exact moment they approached the ranch. Finally, the first ship appeared above them, low in the sky, scanning for life forms. Jarek held his breath. Lyra's eyes were wide, but she did not move. The ship passed directly over a decoy, which emitted a false signal. The alien vessel diverted instantly, chasing the fake target. Jarek exhaled slowly. Humans were clever. Humans were unstoppable when they needed to be. The night stretched on, and the alien ships began to disperse, still searching but falling into traps and false signals. Jarek and Lyra used the opportunity to move closer to the ranch, preparing the final defense line. Lyra's knowledge of the devices proved invaluable. She helped modify the traps, creating a network of interference that could slow down even the most advanced alien sensors. As they worked, Jarek finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Who are you, really? Where did you come from?" Lyra hesitated, then began to draw more symbols in the dirt, more lines connecting stars and planets. Jarek watched closely. He could see her homeworld, a distant human colony, now lost in space. The aliens had attacked it, capturing or killing most humans. Lyra had escaped, and somehow, through desperation and courage, had found her way to this remote planet. Her story was clear. Humans could survive even when everything seemed lost, even when they were scattered across the galaxy, facing enemies far stronger than themselves. They adapted. They endured. They thrived. Jarek felt a deep respect for her. She was young, terrified, alone, but she had the spirit of humanity in her. She had survived when others had failed, using courage, intelligence, and determination. She was proof of what humans could do, even against impossible odds. They worked through the night, modifying traps, adjusting devices, and preparing signals to mislead the alien fleet further. Lyra's fear gradually gave way to determination. Jarek could see it in the way she moved, the way she planned, the way she trusted him. They were a team now, united by necessity and human ingenuity. By dawn, the final preparations were complete. Jarek and Lyra stood on the ridge, looking out over the red plains. The alien fleet was still in the distance, but they were ready. Traps were set, decoys were in place, and signals were configured. Humans could fight with weapons, with brains, and with courage. They could survive anywhere. Jarek placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we survive. Together. That's what humans do." Lyra nodded, her eyes steady. She no longer seemed frightened, only determined. She had learned, adapted, and accepted that her survival depended on humans' greatest traits: intelligence, courage, and resilience. The alien hum grew louder, closer, signaling that the fleet was moving in for a second approach. Jarek and Lyra took their positions, ready to use every trick, every trap, every human skill they had. The night was filled with tension, danger, and the possibility of death, but also the possibility of triumph. Humans had survived the impossible before. They had adapted to worlds no one else could live on. They had fought enemies far stronger, smarter, and more numerous than themselves. And now, on this barren red planet, facing an alien fleet, they would do it again. Jarek glanced at Lyra. She gave him a small nod, a silent promise. Together, they would face the danger, outsmart the enemy, and prove once more that humans could endure anything. The winds of the planet howled around them, dust swirling in the pale moonlight. The alien fleet moved closer, unaware that the humans before them were ready not just to survive, but to win. And in that quiet, tense moment, Jarek understood something deeply. This stranger at his fence, the one crying, lost and terrified, was more than just someone to protect. She was a reminder of what humans could do: cleverness, courage, resilience. Even alone, humans could survive. Together, they were unstoppable. The alien fleet approached, and the humans waited, ready to show the galaxy why no one should ever underestimate them. The red plains were quiet, almost too quiet. Jarek crouched behind a jagged rock, his eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Lyra mirrored his posture, her hands gripping the strange devices she now understood better than before. The alien fleet was close, their faint hums vibrating through the ground, growing louder with every passing minute. "Stay calm," Jarek whispered. "Watch and listen. They're smart, but we're smarter." Lyra nodded, her eyes wide but steady. The hours of preparation, the drills, and the traps had taught her one crucial lesson: humans could survive anything, even when outnumbered and outgunned. She had learned to think like Jarek, to predict enemy movements, and to improvise with nothing but what the planet offered. The first ship appeared just as the twin moons dipped low behind the mountains. It hovered silently, scanning the plains. Jarek held his breath, waiting for the right moment. The decoys activated automatically, a series of holographic images showing humans moving across the open ground. Dust rose in carefully orchestrated puffs, masking their real location. The alien ship's sensors flickered, tracking the false signals. It hesitated, then followed the decoy. Jarek gave a small nod to Lyra. It was working. The aliens were clever, but humans had a different kind of cleverness, one born of survival, instinct, and adaptation. Suddenly, another hum approached from the opposite side, a second ship. Jarek cursed under his breath. Their traps were designed for a single approach, but humans adapted fast. He signaled to Lyra. Together, they triggered a series of holographic mirrors along the cliff edges. The mirrors reflected the ship's sensors, creating the illusion of multiple humans moving across the plain. The alien vessel hesitated, then changed course. Lyra smiled faintly. "We can do this," she said, her voice low but confident. Jarek didn't answer. There was no time. The fleet was larger than he expected. more organized, and the real danger lay in the unknown tactics they might use. But humans thrived in uncertainty. Improvisation was a weapon no alien could fully predict. The ships began descending, scanning for heat signatures and energy signals. Jarek had prepared the ranch meticulously. Hidden trenches, camouflaged rocks, and devices rigged to emit false heat readings masked their location. Lyra crouched beside him, her hands on a control panel she had learned to operate. Tiny pulses of energy sent decoys across the plain. Every pulse, every signal was calculated, designed to delay, confuse, and mislead. A sudden bright light cut across the plains. One of the alien ships had detected a minor error in their system and altered course. Jarek cursed again but stayed calm. Humans never panicked. They adapted. He quickly recalibrated the nearby devices, sending the ship's sensors into a loop. The vessel spun in circles, trapped by its own programming. Lyra watched, fascinated. "They're not used to this," she said. "No," Jarek replied. "They're not used to humans." Hours passed as the alien fleet circled, probing, testing, and searching. Jarek and Lyra stayed hidden, using every trick, every device, every natural feature of the land to their advantage. The aliens were advanced, yes, but humans had something else: unpredictability, creativity, and courage. Finally, one of the larger ships descended directly toward the ranch. It scanned with a high-powered beam, searching for life. Jarek signaled to Lyra, and they activated the final trap. A series of hidden energy pulses lit up the ground, creating a decoy heat signature mimicking human movement. The ship focused on it, firing a scanning beam that triggered small, hidden countermeasures. Explosions of light and sound erupted, confusing the ship's sensors. It wobbled, losing focus, and then retreated slightly, unsure of what it had seen. "Now," Jarek whispered.
Moo!
They darted from their hiding spot, running across the cliffs with practiced speed and precision. Lyra's devices emitted pulses that interfered with the ship's tracking systems. They reached the top of a ridge, overlooking the red plains below. From this vantage point, they could see the alien ships regrouping, their formations now less precise, their sensors overwhelmed by human ingenuity. Lyra looked at Jarek. "We can't keep this up forever," she said. "I know," he replied. "But we can buy time, and humans always find a way." The fleet began to adapt. They deployed smaller drones, faster and more agile than the main ships. These drones scanned systematically, searching for heat, movement, or energy. Jarek cursed softly. They couldn't let the drones reach the ranch. "Follow my lead," he said. "We lure them into the canyon." He had noticed a narrow canyon not far from the ranch, a perfect trap. They would use it to funnel the drones, then activate the interference fields and energy pulses, disorienting them. Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they ran toward the canyon, staying low, hiding behind rocks, and using every trick Jarek had taught her. As they approached, the drones closed in, tiny, fast, and relentless. They scanned the area with bright blue lights. Jarek and Lyra waited until the last possible moment, then triggered the canyon trap. Energy pulses lit the narrow passage, mirrors reflected the beams, and decoy heat signatures created confusion. The drones collided, spun out of control, and fell into hidden trenches. One by one, they were neutralized, forced back, or destroyed. Lyra let out a quiet laugh of relief. "We did it," she said, though they both knew the fight wasn't over. "Part of it," Jarek said. "Humans survive in stages. We adapt, we fight, and we survive." As night fell, the fleet hovered at the edge of the plains, regrouping. The humans had proven clever, but the aliens were not defeated yet. Jarek and Lyra returned to the ranch, quickly checking traps, reinforcing fences, and preparing for the next wave. During a brief rest, Lyra began speaking more, gesturing, drawing in the dirt, and finally attempting words. Slowly, a story emerged. Her colony had been peaceful, advanced, and spread across distant systems. The alien fleet had attacked, seeking control over human colonies, capturing or killing those who resisted. Lyra had escaped, her family lost, her people scattered. She had been fleeing ever since. Jarek listened quietly, nodding. Humans could endure, yes, but they were strongest when united. He realized that Lyra's survival was not just a testament to her own courage. It was proof that humans, even scattered across the stars, could survive against enemies far stronger and more technologically advanced. The night passed, filled with the hum of distant ships and the occasional flare of scanning beams. Jarek and Lyra worked in silence, their partnership now unspoken but complete. Every trap, every pulse, every decoy reflected the ingenuity and adaptability of humans. They were resourceful, relentless, and fearless when faced with impossible odds. As dawn broke, the twin moons setting behind the mountains, Jarek looked at Lyra. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we finish this. Humans survive because we never give up. That's what makes us strong." "That's why we endure?" Lyra nodded, her determination clear. She had seen fear, loss, and danger, but she had also seen human ingenuity, courage, and resilience firsthand. She knew they could survive, and more than that, they could win. Across the plains, the alien fleet moved closer, unaware of the traps, decoys, and clever strategies waiting for them. They thought humans were weak, isolated, and easy prey. But humans were never easy prey.